Yeah, good evening. So last session we learned about cookies, right? How they work. I hope you tried. So next, after understanding the use cookies, how we configure, create, and all, we will implement later in an single page application example how to handle cookies. Uh, Now another important hook is use reducer. Another hook we have use reducer. Actually, the purpose, what is the purpose of use reducer? uh, for this you need to understand about the concept of one small idea will give you about Redux. Separately Redux we will see, but this is hook related to that Redux, right? Actually, what is Redux, how this Redux works, one simple overview will see. Generally, when you look at this, right, this is the basic point about Redux. That means why you need Redux. Yesterday already I told you that Redux is a state container. So it is used for, why we need Redux is already we discussed that managing state in JavaScript application is very important. Any web application state is important. What Redux can do is it can employ predictable state container to simplify the state management. Actually, what is purpose of Redux is to maintain state for your components so that you can store a value and use that across multiple requests of same component, across multiple requests of same component. Actually, that already done by context. Context is doing the same thing. Purpose of context is store the data and make it available across multiple requests. But context is implicitly used, and context is an implicitly available hook of React which creates context. This is not much secured if you are trying to handle any private data. Then context is always dangerous, it is not safe. So because anything you maintain natively and anything you try to use natively for application will be always having security issues. That means it can be very easy for hacking the state, easy to access the state. Why developers prefer third party state if already context is there? Because Redux works like context only, everything similar to context. That means making information available across multiple requests. Redux is advantage is nothing but it is an external library. If it is an external library, using a library externally always uses the concept of abstraction. What is abstraction? It uses the concept of abstraction. Context is not abstract. Redux is abstract. What is meant by abstraction? Abstraction, OOP concept, no? Right? What is abstraction? Abstract classes. What is abstraction? Hmm? Abstraction is data hiding. Abstraction is data hiding. That means it hides the data and gives only functionality. That is actually abstraction. Later in a TypeScript, I will tell you, because JavaScript don't have any abstract members, because JavaScript is not a OOP language, but it is TypeScript supports that. TypeScript have abstract. That means actually pointer you here is I will don't worry at my code what I am writing, just see it. I will add a new folder here. And in that, so demo.ts TypeScript. See, for example, so we have an interface. Just outline I will give here. A product is an interface. It have name. It is string type, and price is number type, and quantity is also number type, and the total is a number type method, and the print is an void type method. Like this, I have some members. Now we are creating a abstract class, so called product template, and this implements actually iProduct here. And here we defined, see, we are configuring name. So this is name, yeah, name. Here we defined public. So name, it is a name and it is a string type. It is string type and it has some data. Okay, so public some price, it is a number type and it is empty. Another one is public quantity is a number type and it is also empty. And abstract total, so it's number, and abstract print, that is an void, right? Now I am creating a class called some product component. This extends the product template. Now here I am defining name is equal to some Samsung TV. So, and the price is equal to some price, and quantity is equal to some quantity. Total is a method, and it should return this dot quantity into this dot price. And here print is a method which should print all details. Console.log. Suppose it print all details, huh? Just roughly I'm giving. Here, this is a component. We designed a component. In this component, I am using a member. So I am using a component and there is a member called name. This component is using a template. Remember, here template contains the structure. Template contains the structure. Structure means name, string type, price, number type, and all. In this component, suppose I am trying to apply price as a string. It is showing error. So the data type of price is not mentioned here, right? Then how it is restricting? the price is not mentioned here, then how it is restricting? How it is saying the price is it says string, it is not assignable because it is number. How it is doing this? Actually, it is doing that by implementing implementing a template, and the template is an abstract class. That means template contains a structure. That structure is being used by your component. That means component is using the members, and the structure of those members are hidden. They are not available here. They are coming from its abstract class. This is many times it will be very much wrong in OOPS if anybody says abstraction is data hiding. Actually, abstraction is not data hiding. Abstraction is data structure hiding. Data structure hiding. That means it hides the data structure and provides only data. That means data structure is hidden. What type of data and what range of data is allowed is hidden. So only the functionality is given to you. That means what is the responsibility of an abstract class? What is the responsibility of abstract class in object-oriented programming? The responsibility of abstract class in object-oriented programming is to design template. Later in OOP of TypeScript, I will tell you detailing, right? Don't worry. But if anybody knows already OOP languages, they might have idea on this. That's the reason. Otherwise, I will tell you in TypeScript. We will have TypeScript basics. We will discuss that. So hiding the structure and providing only functionality is safe. That means we are not giving, you see, we are giving a component to anybody to use. The structure is hidden and only functional structure comes from its template. So process of hiding the structure and providing only functionality is called abstraction. That means hiding the structure and providing only functionality. That is safe. What context is doing is context is providing the structure and data. That is not safe. What Redux will do is it hides the structure and provides only functionality. That makes the context safe. That is the reason. So many times it is recommended not to use context if you are dealing with some complex data. If your data is open, anybody can see it, no issues. So security issues are not there, then you can go with context. If your data is secured, means private, it needs security, then go with Redux. Right? That is very important. So these are two important basic things you need to know. So here first point is actually Redux separate library. I will tell you later. Here we are learning related to hooks. Redux separate library we will discuss. So Redux reducer is used to define a state, predictable state container for component. Predictable state container for component. Predictable state container for component. So it can store data and make it available across requests. Make it available across requests. So it can store the data and make it available across requests. So actually, context is similar. Context is similar to state, similar to Redux. So reducer. Context is similar to reducer, but it is not safe. Is similar to reducer, but it is not safe. So context is similar to reducer, but it is not safe. Right? What is problem here is, what is the problem with the context? That means actually context stores the data and structure. Context stores the data and structure. It stores the data and structure. Whereas reducer hides the structure and provides data. It hides the structure and provides data. So what is the advantage of that? Is it is safe. So it is safe when compared to context. It is safe when compared to context. So the same type of work you can do with context also, but context is not safe. Now, actually, in that case, reducer is better. No, reducer is not better always. Why reducer is not better? Because it is an external library again. So using an external library, that means, for example, if I ask you a question like, suppose I want to make this paragraph bold. If I want to make paragraph bold, I can write B. Am I right? I can write B. Or I can write paragraph font weight as bold. Which one is better? What is difference between these two? Both are bold only, right? What is difference between both? What is difference between both? Actually, technically here, I told you in the introduction itself, right? So the point is, this uses DOM and this uses CSSOM object model. That means if you are trying to use this additional style, then another object model, it will be slow when compared to this only DOM, because externally you should apply. That means this is better, right? This is better. That means many times the question is, you have width and height in general elements, then why you write width and height in style also, right? Why you define it? Because width and height is defined, so in styles will be external. But what is advantage of this external width and height or other things? External width and height, you can adjust width and height according to viewport also. So width and height you cannot adjust according to viewport for your elements. These kind of issues will be there. That is the reason using an internal container or using an external container, that depends on your requirements. That means it's not like context is not good and because it is not safe. context is required and used because it is implicit. If it is implicit, you can configure, you can use it implicitly and it will be faster. But it is not safer. If you are looking for safety, then go with Redux. No, then go with context. That depends, right? So this is basic point. Redux separate, I will tell you, architecture. I will tell you separate architecture. So here we are learning about only hook related concept. Redux separate points are there, I will tell you. Means you have to know architecture and everything, how it works. Actually, what React is doing is React 16 plus version provides React 16 plus version provides use reducer. It provides use reducer hook to maintain predictable state for component. So that is one important point. It provides predictable state. And actually here use reducer. So React use reducer comprises of two components. It comprises of two components. Actually, two important components are present. We have a reducer. And we have a dispatcher. We have a reducer and dispatcher. Two important React reducer provides. One is reducer, another one dispatcher. So what is reducer? Actually, reducer is nothing but it first actually reducer. Reducer is nothing but it defines the actions to perform. It defines the actions to perform. Reducer defines the actions to perform. Actually, reducer is used for defining the actions. What actions to perform? So technically, what reducer will do is it specifies what actions we have to perform. So, and what this reducer can do is, that means syntactically, so we define a function. So the function is a reducer function. This reducer function will actually accept the state and action. It will accept the state and action. So reducer is going to accept the state and action. It is going to accept the state and action. And generally what happens is it will define, that means this action contains type. So that means, for example, it uses, I will simply write here condition. I will define a switch. In that we have action type. It will take the action type, and based on the action type, it will perform the activity. What action to perform? I will explain this. What action to perform it will do. I will explain one simple point here. Action type. So if it is case is matching with the type you mentioned, so it is matching with the type you mentioned, then it will perform certain functionality. Okay, it is going to handle certain functionality. This is just syntax. Later we will define various. So what reducer, what it will do is it will return the state. Actually it will return the state. It will return a specific state on that particular functionality. I will explain this, right? What is this combination actually, how it actually works. So reducer defines what actions to perform. It will tell what action to perform. Actually, it is like just concept is, suppose, let me give in a clear another point. It's general thing. Actually, we have already, we know in general, suppose we have an object. So suppose we have a object that is, suppose button. We have a button object. Now this button is having like some submit. Okay. Now this button is having some color. Okay. Now actually, when you configure this here, this is nothing but button width, so is 200 pixel, height is 30 pixel, and background color, so it is like yellow. Like this, we have some options. Button have text called submit. This is the option. Now usually we have submit, you have reset, we have print, like options defined. Submit, reset, print, something like. Now very important is these are nothing but width, height, and all these are nothing but these define the these define how the object looks like. That means height, width, color, all these defines how it looks like. So these are considered as properties. These are considered as properties. That means the properties will describe how the object looks like, how the objects looks like. Now here, what this object can do, what this object can do. So these are called methods. These are called methods. What an object can do. So those are called methods. That means it can submit, it can reset, it can print, but currently it is designed to submit. But it can be later designed to reset, because button have button type reset, button type submit, button type button. You can use for any purpose. Button is not only for submit, right? That means these are called methods. Now tell me, who dispatches these methods? Who dispatches these methods? When it will submit, who dispatches these methods? Who dispatches these methods? Actually, you have on click, like on suppose I say mouse over, right? On click, on mouse over. Button usually can have mouse over. Button have like on DBL click, that is double click. What these are called as? These generally we call as events. So event is actually means, I am explaining in your way of understanding in a simple point. These events are treated as dispatchers. That means event tells when to do that work. Event dispatches a message. That means event sends a notification. It dispatches a message. And when it dispatches the message, it will do these methods. That means what methods are nothing but the actions performed by that object. The actions performed by the object are methods. And when these actions are performed on a event. So event is a dispatcher and reducer is an methods. That means what reducer contains here, it is reducer, right? Now what reducer contains? Reducer contains actions to perform. What actions to perform? The actions to perform are defined by reducer, right? Reducer defines actions to perform and dispatcher will tell when to do those actions. When to do those actions. That means reducer is configuring actions to perform, and these actions may return some values. No? Actions may return some values, and those returned values are stored. That means reducer or the data also. That means reducer defines what actions to perform and what data to return, what data to store. That means reducer comprises of two important things. So one is the actions and the state. Reducer comprises of these two things, that is the actions and the state, right? What actions to perform and what data to store. That is what actually the concept of reducer. So reducer defines the actions to perform. It defines the data to store. Yeah, right? It can define the data to store. That is the concept of reducer. So that is first important thing you need to understand, how the reducer works. Right. So that is reducer's responsibility. I hope you are clear, right? That means what is reducer? Then what is dispatcher? So what is dispatcher? So dispatcher is nothing but, that is why we have two things. We have state and we have action. So it will recognize what is the action type, and based on that it will return the state. So here reducer predicts the action type and returns relative data. Right. Reducer predicts the action type and returns the relative data. That is why it is called predictable state container. Predictable state container. That means it is not going to return always same, depending on the situation. That means if it predicts the situation, and according to that it will return the data, right? It returns the data and it keeps the data available in such a way that whenever that is required, again it is provided to the component. That means it makes the data, that means it makes the data available across requests. It makes the data available across requests. So that is what actually it can do, right? That is initial. So how do we configure the state and how we can define the state? Right. So configuring the state and defining the state. Okay, next what happens is, next step is Dispatcher, what dispatcher will do? Just now we discussed it. What dispatcher can do? What is the responsibility of dispatcher? The responsibility of dispatcher, it is nothing but it it follows. You remembered one design pattern. Event follows a design pattern. I told you which one. Event follows a software design pattern. Which one? Event follows one software design pattern. I told you. Yeah, event follows. It follows observer pattern. Remember? Observer is a software design pattern. It follows observer pattern. Observer pattern. Actually, observer pattern, it is a communication pattern. Am I right? In software design patterns, it is a communication pattern. Observer is a communication pattern. What this communication pattern can do? This communication pattern can send a message to the reducer. It can send a message to the reducer. What it will do? It will dispatch the action type and notifies the reducer. It will dispatch the action type and notifies the reducer. That means it will dispatch the action and tells the reducer, and reducer will do the functionality. That means actions are performed by reducer. Actions are dispatched by dispatcher. It has to dispatch by dispatcher. So when it is dispatched by dispatcher, what should happen here? So what should happen here? So that is nothing but, so for example, we define like this, dispatcher. Yeah. So it defines like this. That means suppose we have a button, right? So button on click. What we have to do is we have to dispatch the action to perform. That means here we need to configure like this. What we have to do, we need to write an event. What this event have to return, right? This event have to return some action type. That means it is going to return an object. So that means it will be using type, action type. It will tell the type of the action. Suppose this is type A, understood? Later I will give complete figure, right? Structure about this. It returns type A. On click, it will execute an action which is returning an object, and that object type is A. Now this will be catched by your reducer, and if it is A, understood? It will return that state. If the action type is A, then it will do this work. That means the dispatcher is dispatching the message. So now what happens is on click, it will dispatch the action. How it will do that? Actually, for that, it have to use a method. By using the method, it will dispatch. That means dispatch is a method actually. I will give a complete context. I am just giving syntaxes basic first. Right? I am just telling that it will dispatch an action. It will configure and dispatch an action. Now, based on that, it will perform that functionality. For example, if it is, suppose another button on click is dispatching. So is dispatching type as a B, right? Type as B. It is dispatching type as B. That means there is a reducer here, right? So here it will define another case. What is it? B. If it is case B, then it will do some other work. That means it will return certain another state. It will return state. It will return that state. That means whatever data is defined, that is configured in that particular state. It will configure in that state. Now I will give a complete overview, right? First, you need to understand the relation between dispatcher and reducer. So two basic things. Reducer contains data and actions, and dispatcher defines when it have to submit the data, access the data, or maintain the data. That is options. So let's put this in a simple summary. Right? So in the summary, reducer defines actions and stores data. Right? It defines actions and stores data. Whereas dispatcher, what dispatcher will do? Dispatcher configures observer pattern, right? Observer pattern configures observer pattern that dispatches, that will dispatch specified action, that will dispatch specified action. This is what it can perform. Reducer defines actions and stores data, and dispatcher configures observer pattern that will dispatch the specified action. Right. So this is one important point. Let me give you in a simple, understandable diagram so that you can understand, right? Basic point. You will get clarity one by one. Once I put them in one example, you will see that. Actually, let me keep this in a simple example here. See, for example, so we have application. This is application memory, right? Suppose this is your application. This is your application memory. This is your application memory. Actually, we have the application memory, right? That is application memory. In this application memory, usually what happens is we configure in the application memory, we configure initial state. We configure initial state. In the application, we configure initial state. Suppose this is initial state. In the initial state, suppose I am defining some count is equal to 0. Some value I configured there. So in the initial state, it is count is set to 0. Now what happens is for every component is memory is allocated. For every component, memory is allocated. For every component, memory is allocated. Think that this is a component. This is component. This is component memory. This is component memory. We have application memory and we have component memory. Now what happens is in this component memory, actually in this component memory, we configure a state. Already we learned that every component have a state, right? Every component will configure a state. Now what happens is when you configure state, and in this component memory, you will configure and action also, state and action. Two options will be there, that is the state and action. Now what happens is in the application memory, it will maintain, in the application memory, it will maintain a state container. Initial state is that means it will maintain a state container. State container is not at component level, it is at application level. It is at application level. What happens is now, suppose an action is performed, any action is performed. For example, the action I given as, some action I given as likes. Suppose I used likes. That means generally likes counter is count we are accessing count, so plus plus increment by 1, right? Count value will be increment by 1, and the likes value is stored. So this likes value is stored in the current state, am I right? The likes value is stored in the current state. That means in the state we are storing the likes count. We are storing that likes count. When we store the likes count in the current state, what will happen when you configure the likes count in the current state? When I load this component again, this likes count will reset again. That means actually now the state inside this contains the likes count value. Let me keep that count value little bit. I will shift this here. Yeah. And actually this state is using the likes value. Okay. Let keep this here as what likes is equal to 1. It is configured to 1. Now what happens is when I reload the component again the likes count will be 0. Again it will be 1. Every time it will be 1. That means when this count is defined based on action, that means this is being performed. This data is being performed on an action. This action is dispatched by some button. Am I right? So button, what it is doing, it is dispatching the action. Button is dispatching the action. I will write in a technical point also. When button is dispatching the action, then what it is doing, it is incrementing and it is storing in this location. It is storing in that location. Whenever the action is dispatched, so it is incrementing, it is performing this functionality. After that, it is storing that result. This will reset every time. When you dispatch, it will reset every time. Now what reducer can do is, now reducer can maintain a state container. Here reducer will come. Am I right? Here reducer will come. What this reducer is going to do is, this reducer is going to collect this value and store in a state container. Reducer have a state again. Understood? It configures a state. In this state, it will be likes is equal to how much? 1. Understood? In this state, likes equal to 1. Now what happens is, that means this is stored here. Let's say this is stored inside that here. Now what happens is, whenever the component is reloaded, its state will be set to 0. That means again when component is reloaded, what will happen? The like will be how much? 0. When component is loaded, it is 0. But now what will happen? This reducer will send this value to the state. It will send the value to the state. It will send this value to the state. That means next time when the component loads, it will get the value from the state. From which state? Reducer state. Reducer state is at application level. Component state is at component level. Component state will reset, but application state will be there. That means your data is stored in a separate state container. You have 2 state containers now. One is the local state container of your component, which will reset. But another one, application state, which will keep the value until the application closes. Or you delete the application state when you remove the application state. Until that state will be maintained. That means the same component, that means you dispatch the action again. When you dispatch the action again, next time what it will do is, next time you know that what is the count value like will be it taken from global state. It is 1 plus 1, 2. After that, what it will do is it will store that value 2 here. Understood? Again, next time container resets, component resets. When component resets, what will happen? 0. Then it will bring the previous value from the global state, reducer state. It will bring the value from there. There it is already 2. Then it will be 2 plus 1, 3. That is how it will manage the container. That means you are maintaining a state outside the context. Outside the context. So, and at application level, what is context? Context is for component. It is available to its inner component. But this is available outside the context, outside the component. And it is available for the same component. It is available for the same component across multiple requests. That's how actually the process works. This is only related to hook I explained. Use reducer hook I explained. Actually, we also have a concept of Redux where some more options will come. Redux is a library that provides some more options. But this, I explained this simple architecture only related to reducer hook. You will come across with only 2 things here. What is it? Reducer and dispatcher. That is the basic thing. You have to create a reducer and you have to create a dispatch. Right? I hope you understood this process. So when component is configured, state is created. In the state, we can store the data. After storing the data, we will save this outside the component in a global container, state container. When component resets, no problem. We can bring that from the outer state and use it for the component. It will continue. It will continue to use the data which is outside the scope of the component. So that is what actually the process is, right? So this is application memory. That is the reason. So you have to note that. So reducer manages state container at application level. At application level, reducer manages state container at application level. This is basically how it is working, right? One small point actually. So first step, that means I will give here step by step how to configure. How do we define the steps? First step is you have to configure. Step 1, configure initial state. We have to configure initial state. I have those ready made. I will copy that instead of writing all those. Hooks state is there already. I will just copy. This cookie is already. Yeah. So this is the first step. Initial state. Here it is. This is second step to happen. First step is this. Yeah. First step, configure initial state. What we will do is we can define initial state. Initial state, we will create an object. We have a count. Count is a number. It is set to 0. That is first one. Then step 2, second step. We have to configure reducer. after configuring initial state, we have to configure reducer. Reducer is a function, as I told you, which will contain two things. One is state, another one action. So you have to configure the reducer in this way. Function reducer, it will have state and action. So this is, if type is 1, then return the state. If type is 2, and return another state. Depending on the type, we need to configure. If action type is this, then we will, that means action is an object which is expecting what? Type as a property. So when you pass based on the type, it will perform the functionality and store the data, right? That is what it will do. If default means, if it is not doing anything, that means if the action passed is not among, then it will do some other alternative work, right? That means suppose you clicked something which is not inside the specified actions, then it will say invalid operation or some other message you can display that you can configure. So second step is configure the reducer. That is how we configure the reducer. Next, step 3. After configuring the reducer, then we have to define the actions. That means, so to configure use reducer. Configure use reducer hook for component that will manage the state and actions. That will manage the state and actions. So you have to configure use reducer hook for component that will manage the state and actions. That means actually, so we have to configure in this way. So state and actions are defined in this way. We have to use reducer. This button already I told you just now. So you have to configure in this way. That means you have to define in this constant. You need two things, one state, another one dispatch. This is actually initial state. State is actually using initial state. And it is using dispatch. Dispatch is nothing but actually action. We have two options, initial state and action. Now on button click, what we are doing, we are dispatching. So we are dispatching what? We are dispatching action. Action is an what? Object. In that object, we have some property like value. Type is like or some dislike like this we are configuring. Right. Now that's it. So use reducer hook is going to manage the data across the request and display. That means what we have to do, step 4. So you can access the state and return data. You can access the state and return data. That means what it can do is you can have state. State is initial state. Initial state is also an object which contains what? Count. The count it will return. State.count, because this is initial state. State is initial state. So this initial state is going to have an object called object with a property count. So we can access that count and we can use it. So this is the basic process, how configure the state and configure the reducer and configure the dispatchers. Based on that, we can define the actions, right? Configure and specify the action. Now, one simple example we will see here means this diagram I will put here, save. I will save this for your upload. React reducer state. Okay, fine. Now we will see this as one implementation like this now. I will keep this implementation in this way. Right. What we are trying to design in the example is, right? Yeah. Here we will design one concept. Same option. I will create a block here like this. Yeah. For example, suppose we have an image. That means we will keep some image in our component, right? And in this image, what we will do is, I think I am saving on the same thing. Right. See, we will use a simple example in this way. What we will do is, here you maintain application state. So in this application state, reducer will maintain state, right? And in this state, we will store likes and we will store dislikes. Like option we will define. Likes and dislikes, like option we will put. And here we will add component. And in the component, we will keep the buttons. So like and dislike are the buttons here. And we will keep an image. So image will have the likes and dislikes counter. Now what happens is, when a user clicks on this button, the likes counter should increase. And actually this is component memory. That is component state, right? From the component state, the data must store into reducer state. And from the reducer state, again, the data should come into component state. This is the approach we need to follow. Right? That is the approach we need to define. So for that, we will create one simple example. Suppose let's add a new file here. In the components, add a component, reducer demo.js. Okay. Let's export default function. So reducer demo. Okay. And return. Suppose I will just add a container fluid, and here I will just put basic. First I will design, later we will create images and all. That means suppose I say likes counter, something like this we define. Now you have two buttons here. So like, another button we have like dislike, like this we define. Now we will put in the startup reducer demo. Okay. You don't need a cookies provider as of now. Reducer demo. Okay. Let's start this npm start. Okay, meanwhile, we will design this. Okay, fine. Just I created these two. Here we will go to the function. Here we will import. So we have to import use reducer, and we need to import some state. State is not required as of now. Use state. Okay. This is the hook we have. Now inside the first we will create globally initial state. Initial state, it is an object. So count is set to 0. That is globally configured initial state. So if it is globally configured, then only you can access from any component function, you can access that state. So this is application memory, right? Actually, so what we call the scope outside function. This scope outside function is not global. Global, okay, it is global, but what is the component name outside function? Whatever is there outside function means this entire JavaScript file, what it is? What is this entire JavaScript file? Module. It is module scope. In a module, you will have functions, classes, and all. No? That means it is module scope. So in a module, you will configure the functions and all, define the functions and all. Okay, now here we need to configure reducer. That means we have to define a reducer. So I am creating a reducer. So we have a function. The function is a reducer. Reducer. What this reducer function will have? This reducer function will define two things as per the configuration. What are those two things? It will define state and it will define action. We have to configure now, right? That is the second step we have to do. Where is it? Yeah. The first step we already configured. The first step we already configured the initial state. So we need to configure this now. And in the state we have action. So I will write a switch. Into the switch we will pass the action. Action is expecting. Action is an object with a property type. Right here we have to define. So action type we have to collect and we need to write the case. If it is like, right? If it is like, then what should happen is it should return state. It should return state. That means how it returns the state. How it returns the state and what it should return state. Like means it should increment the count. Right? That means it should return the state. So actually what it is going to return functional, it should return the state incrementing the count by 1. Right? That is what it have to do. That means it should return, suppose I said count. What actually count contains? So this count actually, that means it returns what this means. It returns an object. That object contains a property count. That count should contain what it should contain, state dot count. So plus 1. We have to configure that one. state dot count plus 1, it have to return that value. So actually this is another count plus 1. In the state we will store that value. Okay, that is how we are configuring. This is nothing but we are configuring a state, and in that state is an object. Now state object will contain count plus 1. It will be configured as the count, right? So that is action to define. And you already know. Do I need any break statement now? I'll copy this example. Do we need any break statement here? Already we are using return. We don't need any break statement, right? I will copy this example. I'll keep it simple. We don't need any break statement here because already written is an jump statement. Already written is a jump statement. You don't need any break, right? So what is difference? Difference. That means what is the difference? Difference between return and break. Both are jump statements only. What is the difference between return and break? Anyone? Difference. Return will not return value. Yeah, actually the concept of, yeah. So you know that break terminates the block. Terminates the block, but still continuous execution. Understood? That means compiler still continues execution. Break will terminate the block. It will come out of the block, but still execution continues. But remember, return terminates execution. It terminates execution. It terminates execution. That means permanently stop. It will not continue. That means again you have to load the function into memory in order to continue. That means return is not returning the value, right? Return is jump statement. How it returns a value? Jump statement will not return a value, right? It is going to terminate. It is going to terminate. That means if anyone says, actual, that is the point. These diagrams I will keep later. That means you configured here a function, and suppose addition a comma b, and here it is c equal to a plus b. That is one point, and I am writing another one, c. So I defined a function. So addition a comma b, and so here return a plus b. What is difference? Both are doing same operation na? Both are doing same operation, then what is difference? Hmm? Actually, here the point is very simple actually. Generally, this method is void type. Void type. So, but this is written with return. Don't think that return means returning a value. Returning a value. What it is doing is, generally, what is difference here is addition is taking two parameters A, B, and storing data of A and B. What is C? Is it a function variable? Actually, A, B are using function memory and C is an external memory. Is an external memory. So in that memory, you are storing the result. If I use this return, what return will do is it will discard the memory. It will discard the memory, and what it will do is it will store this A plus B in addition. That means the function is doing the functionality and storing the result. It is performing the functionality and storing the result. That means the same memory is used for performing operation and storing the data. Right? That means you are not using any external memory. That is the reason if anybody says, what is void? Void means it discards the return. It discards the return. That means it will allocate another memory where C is stored. But here the same memory is used. That means we don't need any additional memory. That means the memory of the function can be used for both performing operation as well as storing the result. That means now what is the type of addition? Type of addition is number. If A and B are number, type of addition is number. That means, so here the same concept is happening actually. Same concept is happening. So you can just define count. I will just use state dot count plus 1. I will just add a object, a return object. Object contains count. What it will return? It will return this count. Count will be this one. And after that, it will store that result. Store that result in that particular state. It will not use any external memory. That is actually terminating. It is terminating and storing the result in the same state. Same state. That is what the meaning here. Why I explained this function? So because it is relative to that concept. That means, so we are return is not returning value. Return is discarding the memory. And it is storing the result in the same memory. No additional memory required. That means the result of A plus B is present in addition. That means addition is a function and it is a reference. It is a function and reference. Result will be in addition. That is what actually reducer is doing now. Understood? It is doing that particular thing. Okay. Next step, what will happen if the case is what? Some dislike. Case is dislike. What should happen? Then it should return. It should return what? Count. And count state. State dot what? Count minus 1. Like this I can give. Like, dislike options. We will create a good example. Just I am giving syntax based example as of now. Suppose if any other action is there, we can say default and unknown. but currently we have only two buttons. There is no chance of any another action. Okay, now this is fine. Now this reducer must be used. This reducer must be used and it must be configured. So by your component, that the component have to use that. That means now what we have to do is we configured a reducer that is ready. The second step is ready. We configured the reducer, it is ready, right? Now we need to dispatch. We need to dispatch these options and define them. So this reducer function I am creating. So outside here in the scope, reducer we are configuring outside here, because reducer also application level module it will configure. Okay, now how to use that? Here we are configuring in the reducer demo. We are defining what constant. We need two things. One is state, another one is dispatch. Am I right? We need dispatch. It will use reducer. It will use reducer. And reducer is expecting two things. What are those two things? State. State is what? Initial state. And dispatch is reducer. Dispatch is the reducer function, right? Dispatch is the reducer function. We have to configure that. That means now what we have to do is we have to collect the state and send. So here we will just, this reducer is ready. Reducer is configured and ready. Now what we have to do? We have to simply define action on button click. On click. On click. On click we need to call a function. What this function have to do? It should dispatch. Dispatch, right? Dispatch. What it should dispatch? It should dispatch an object which contain type. Type name is what? As like. It should dispatch the action called like. So we need to configure that dispatch. So this is reducer initial state, dispatch same initial state only first. Initial state and reducer. Reducer is expecting once. Let's check. Yeah. Reducer and initializer. Dispatcher, that is the context. Reducer and initializer. That means this first one is reducer, another one is dispatcher, right? Reducer, yeah. Another one is initial state. Initial state. We are configuring that. Okay. Now this dispatch is going to handle that functionality. Dispatch, right? Now it will perform that like. Same we have to define here also. Actually you can write a separate function. I'm just writing in inline. Don't get confused with this inline. Actually what we have to do, so don't get confused with that inline. What we have to do is we have to define handle like click. Understood? So it's a function. Generally we have to define handle like click function. What this function will do? It will use dispatch. It will use dispatch. And what this dispatch will do? This will dispatch a type. What is the type? Like. And on the button click, what should happen? We have to just use what? Handle like click. Like this you can write. That is, don't get confused with the event technique, right? So the same thing we should happen on this option also. What is it? On click. On click we have to use, suppose, handle dislike. Dislike click. Okay, just we have to define. So function handle dislike click. Now what dispatch will do? Dispatch is going to take the type. So type, what is the type? Dislike. Already it should take type. Type is a dislike. Dislike. That is the action to be performed. Now, when it dispatches, the result will be stored inside the state count. It will be stored inside the state count. That means here I am printing simply. Here I am simply printing the state, right? State have an option called count. I'm just using that state count and configuring it. So here still some work is there. So I click on like, it will get that like, right? It is maintaining the value. I click on like, it will be 2. I said actually it is unlike, right? Then it will be 1. That means you click like, you can even toggle. You can even toggle. That means you see in websites like and again click unlike, subscribe, unsubscribe, same thing. You can click create a toggle button, right? Here I just created 2 options now. That means now this likes counter is incrementing and displaying the value. And this is decrementing the value. So this is storing in, that means the same component is loading again. The same component is loading again, but the value is picked up from the previous. This is one basic, right? Tomorrow we will create one good example. I will show you one interface, right? Then we can get more clarity on that. One more time, I will explain this with a proper example. This is just syntax. I explained how to configure, how to dispatch, how do we handle. We will see a good example, how we can manage in real world scenario where it works, right? Tomorrow we'll see that one example on this. Then we can go with other hooks. I will finish other hooks. Then I will go with Redux, separate library. Okay. Right. Tomorrow we'll continue.